Hello, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Mary Pettigrew. I'm part of the Empower Our Future communications team. And on their behalf, I want to thank you for joining us for tonight's Empower Hour. I will now read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect as non-native people that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that our government, academic, and cultural institutions and our nation itself were founded upon and continue to extract exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle ongoing legacies of settler colonialism, oppression, and inequities, and to recognize the hundreds of Indigenous nations who continue to resist, live, create, and uphold their sacred relations across these lands. Let us seek to understand what it means to be in right relationship today with the traditional stewards of this land and with this land itself and all the creatures that inhabit it. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Susie Strife, PhD, Director of the Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience for Boulder County. In this role, Susie oversees all of the Boulder County climate action and sustainability efforts, policies and programs, and provides directions on policies and program implementation for internal and external sustainability activities, while managing planning efforts and budgets. An amazing job, obviously. She also serves as the key liaison to other county agencies to support existing projects and guide the county towards a more sustainable future. Susie launched her career receiving a $25 million Department of Energy grant to jumpstart the energy efficiency and clean energy marketplace across Colorado, creating the award-winning Energy Smart service that several utilities across the country have used as model demand-side management energy programs. Susie also launched the first of its kind pooled purchasing program for solar electric bikes and vehicles, accelerating the adoption of clean technology across Boulder County. Most recently, along with colleagues at the City of Boulder and Boulder County, Susie helped launch Communities for Climate Action, which is the first community-based coalition in the state of Colorado lobbying for climate protective policies. Simultaneous to her work at Boulder County, Susie is part-time faculty at the University of Colorado teaching graduate students on climate action and sustainability. She received her PhD with a focus on environmental justice from the University of Colorado in 2009, funded by the EPA's Science to Achieve Results Fellowship. She received her BA from Middlebury College in 2002. Susie's motivated by her young daughters, who are a constant reminder that sustainability is meaningful work, especially in creating a vibrant future for all youth. She is a backcountry ski zealot and trail runner, but her favorite way to spend her time is playing with her high-spirited little girls. Thank you so much, Susie, for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. That was a lot. And I appreciate being here. Thank you so much for having me. Obviously, my name is Susie Strife, and I'm the director of OSCAR, which is the Office of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience for Boulder County, and I teach at the University of Colorado. And I've been on the ground floor of local government implementing climate action, climate change solutions for over 15 years. So I'm really, really grateful to be here with you this evening. And I'm thankful that I have a community of supporters and just community of amazing thinkers in this space who are also dedicated to climate action. So appreciate Empower Hour for having me. So I'm gonna focus a little bit about why local governments matter and our role that we play in Oscar. And then I'm going to try to skim over, because I know this is a very intelligent climate forward crowd, the local climate trends and the goals we have for Boulder County, and focus really on the what we do and the how we do it. So many people wonder why a local government like Boulder County matters in transformational change, but states and local governments have been far long ahead in climate action. There are over 3,000 local governments and tribal nations with climate action programs. And what I see is, in many ways, local government actors are really the first responders to the climate crisis in our communities. And because of that, we face the increased burden of resourcing the mitigation of, preparation for, and recovery from climate change impacts. Communities who care about climate stabilization have been spending limited resources on localized place-based projects that showcase and pilot what's possible at scale. But given the scale of this climate crisis and is so massive, local communities are really starting to evolve together to pool resources and shape best practices in order to leverage the collective wisdom of each other and experts who are defining this space. Here in Boulder County, we've been really fortunate because of progressive leadership, because of incredible nonprofits, incredible think tanks, to have pioneered a lot of climate innovation, and we get to deploy this work to the world. So this is just this year, or maybe even the last 6 months. I can't remember what the climate communications specialist told me, but this showcases a lot of the press that we've had exposure to over just the last 6 months to a year. So our team is really focused on a mission to advance policies and programs that conserve resources, protect the environment, and safeguard our climate in order to build a just, sustainable, and resilient community. That's our mission statement. And as you can see from all of these different chapters, we focus on everything from air quality to water to circular economy. And while I'd love to cover all of that, there's absolutely no way I would be able to in this time. So I'm focused on this evening just on climate. You can see we have a ridiculously ambitious climate goal. That's 80% emissions levels, reducing over 2021 levels by 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2035. This is all playing out in our greenhouse gas inventory. I will note, and this is very important to note, that this is just a sector-based emissions inventory. We are actively working on a consumption-based emissions inventory. So this is just looking at the sectors and not necessarily all the activity of our residents scaled to household level consumption. And that is a humongous part of the story that I would love to tell another day. But when we're just looking at, scope 1 and 2 emissions, we are seeing very similar trends to other communities, which is that 64% of our emissions come from our built environment sector, the residential and commercial sector. And about a third, 26%, come from our transportation emissions. So that's just under a third coming from, again, emissions from transportation and then the built environment. And so when we prioritize our goal and we think about science-based targets, it's absolutely breathtaking how far we need to go to achieve our goals. You look at our 2030 goal, right? And against 2021, and we need to reduce 3.5 million metric tons of carbon emissions. And again, we are taking bold steps to a climate resilient future, yet just like every other city and town, we will fall short of those goals unless there's a massive societal transformation. So we really are trying to think differently about how we address climate change and do it quickly. So that's obviously always a lot of news and not something probably new to you, yet it makes us feel very overwhelmed and I'm sure keeps many of us up at night. I think it's really important to understand the gravity of this moment. And I also think it's really important to talk about what we know we need to do and how fast we need to do it, because we have the tools and we can deploy them. So here are our main areas of focus. Given that a majority of our emissions I just talked about come from the built environment and transportation sector, We are really focused on basically reducing our emissions from fossil gas, those fossil gases that heat and cool our buildings. So we know we need to decarbonize the built environment and electrify our transportation. So we're obviously working on electrifying both. We also know we need to restore our natural systems and enhance nature's ability to draw down and durably store carbon, as carbon sequestration, as well as removing legacy carbon out of the atmosphere, is now a critical part to confronting the climate crisis. And finally, we simultaneously need to prepare for climate risk and continue to help people respond to climate catastrophes that we've already experienced. So I think these are the three whats. And then when you look at the how, we're trying to understand how incredibly important it is where we focus our resources. So first, we're really focused on driving systems change, which includes shaping and instituting policy, regulations, sending market signals, and taking strong action on climate accountability. Second, we are offering climate action services like we always have, which includes a suite of decarbonization activities focused on serving mostly the lower income members of our community, people of color, and those most vulnerable to the climate crisis. And finally, we're fostering innovation and research to ensure that we're spawning climate pioneering work to meet the climate crisis with new approaches. So what do I mean when I say drive systems change? So we often talk about how the scale of the climate crisis and the climate chaos it brings is so great that it really looks like we have to look at systems change as the highest impact lever we have for tackling this crisis and this issue. As you all here know well, the present state of the climate has been and is being shaped by culture, policy, power, and economics, which all influence each other. And through our greenhouse gas inventories, since we've been doing them since 2005, we've been able to look at trends over time. And we've been able to see that the meaningful reductions in our emissions come from larger societal and system shifts that impact us. Let me give you an example. The pandemic had a huge impact on reducing our transportation emissions. Federal increased fuel efficiency standards also had a huge impact on dipping our transportation emissions. So this information highlights two things: that the scale of the problem is so huge and deeply tied to how we power our economies. And two, we as local governments can think differently about how we focus our attention to tackle the root of the problem. So years ago, the Climate Disclosure Project put out a report that showed that 100 entities are responsible for 71% of our emissions. I'm sure you've heard that. There's no doubt that many of these fossil fuel companies have known about the dangers of their products causing carbon pollution for more than 50 years, yet they continue to promote and sell their products while recklessly deceiving the public and policymakers about these dangers. Right here in Colorado, the Union of Concerned Scientists published a groundbreaking report that reveals that the oil and gas industry has used very deceptive tactics to exert outsized political control in Colorado, a corporate strategy that keeps their profits high and threatens our safety. This report shows that fossil fuel industry's deceptive tactics, documenting the various ways it maintains its stranglehold on the political processes and Coloradoans, including millions of spent on deceptive advertisements and lobbying against climate policy. So for us, looking at who is responsible and how these actors are in positions of power, whether politically or economically, underscores that the systems and structures that are ruining our planet are also the same systems and actors that are disempowering, disenfranchising, and disproportionately impacting low-income and communities of color. That's why we see climate change as a justice issue, as the climate crisis is making existing inequalities and injustices a whole lot worse. So what do we do about it? We are one of the first communities to actually sue companies like Exxon and Suncor to pay their fair share of the costs associated with climate change impacts, so that the costs do not fall disproportionately on our taxpayers, because our community will face the very steep cost of climate impacts. This lawsuit, thankfully, has spawned a dozen or more lawsuits, climate litigation actively taking place across the United States, where communities are demanding that the fossil fuel industry pay their fair share of the harms it's inflicted on millions of Americans. Other notable lawsuits right now include those in Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, among others. I want to be clear here that we're not saying oil companies are 100% and they bear 100% responsibility, but they do not bear zero responsibility. And a Boulder County jury should decide what their appropriate contribution is. So this case is really about ensuring the taxpayers of Boulder County and other communities do not have to foot the entire bill of the cost of climate harms. So this is one example of system change we're after, which is climate accountability. Another systems lever is our economic system. We know that we need to avert in order to avert the most devastating impacts of climate change, there can be no expansion of coal, gas, oil, any fossil fuels, which means no new investments in fossil fuel supply projects. And yet we know that Wall Street banks, pension funds, and governments around the world continue to collectively invest trillions of dollars in that very thing. They finance new fossil fuel development and existing fossil fuel developments. So part of our systems change work is to understand and share information and find real world solutions on how local government actors and individuals can divest from fossil fuels. So around the world, there are 1,500 institutions collectively worth 40 trillion that have committed to divesting from fossil fuels. And that number is growing every year. Governments make up 11% of these divestment commitments. So we have a unique opportunity to lead the charge in removing public funds from fossil fuels and paving the way for a sustainable, resilient future. We're about to publish and share widely in public forums a finance climate toolkit, which shares 4 major ways that local governments can decarbonize its funds, including supporting divestment and pension efforts, screening insurance based on their fossil fuel policies, moving public funds out of the top banks financing the climate crisis, and committing to divestment of county and municipal funds from fossil fuels. And the county is actively taking steps towards those strategies. Another systems change is influencing policy and collective action, using collective action to do so. Local governments really have found that pooling our resources and banding together for significant change is much more powerful than going at it alone, especially with regard to creating climate protective policies, both at the state and federal level. We do this through an organization we co-founded with the City of Boulder in 2015 called Communities for Climate Action. This coalition is now 40 counties and municipalities across Colorado advocating for effective statewide climate policy. This represents 1/4 of all Coloradoans. So CC4CA has become a very high impact voice for clean air, climate action, and public health protection. And finally, a really neat new approach to systems change is bringing in community voice to policymaking. So those who've been historically excluded from decision-making arenas are also those most vulnerable to climate impacts. So this year we launched the Climate Policy Leadership Collaborative, which works to advance environmental justice and inclusivity in Colorado's climate policy process. Through support from my team's policy experts, the idea is to really nurture community members in overcoming the barriers to participation in public policy. How do you provide testimony? Where do you show up? What are the forums? How do you participate in hearings? These amazing people in this photo are poised to share their lived experiences with rulemakers and provide community perspectives in Colorado policymaking process. So I just went over a lot on systems change, and now I'd like to discuss just our climate kind of action services. So I'm shifting to sort of more of the localized approach on how we provide services for our residents and businesses across Boulder County. As far as services for our residents, we've been offering this Energy Smart service for over a decade. It's a full advising one-stop shop service that combines technical expertise with the most up-to-date incentive offerings for residents to upgrade to a more climate-friendly home, including efficiency and home electrification. While this service is for all Boulder County residents, we're really focusing our resources on incentives for lower income households where the cost barrier is often too great for serious household upgrades. We're also created a huge swath of a free solar garden subscription up to 3 megawatts for low-income residents, which we're subsidizing. And we support along the way workforce development to train underemployed or unemployed Boulder County residents for jobs in both renewable energy and in the future next year, electrification. So the workforce pipeline is absolutely imperative if we're going to electrify all of our homes and businesses. In commercial, we've been offering this great service called PACE, or Partners for a Clean Environment. And this really is helping this entire sector reduce their emissions, again, through this kind of one-on-one advising service. And we provide pretty major incentives to back that, whether that's renewable energy or now electrification. And there's a lot of technical expertise that comes with this service as well. We've reached over 60% of the Boulder County businesses with this service, and it's just an excellent approach to, again, working on decarbonizing and climate action for the built environment in the commercial sector. On transportation, there's a lot to do here, and we are actively funding EV charging stations. We've actively funded and supported 54 charging stations across the county. We just put an application in for a huge IRA grant to support even more charging stations. We've been accelerating the adoption through pooled purchasing of both, to decrease the upfront cost of both e-bikes and electric vehicles. And we're really helping residents now with education and awareness on understanding how to stack all the incentives to reduce that price point barrier. So there's a lot in the transportation sector, including mobility, which is in our community planning and permitting process, and getting people out of their cars, as well as accelerating the adoption of technology of electric vehicles. The local food and ag sector on climate has been incredible to participate in. We have a local food and ag fund that supports regeneration and carbon farming. So this is an annual funding source that brings together and invites farmers, agricultural producers, the private sectors, and nonprofit organizations to apply for funding to accelerate environmental sustainability practices that benefit the food system and our agricultural lands. These these awardees are actually doing a lot of regeneration projects across Boulder County. And there's, I believe, 32 total participants, but every year we get applications for over 3 million for this particular grant. It's a very popular grant program. In addition, we've been really active in supporting innovation on other regenerative farming activities. A program called Restore Colorado, we originally seed funded, has had wild success. The idea is that participating restaurants collect a few cents from dining or food purchases, and these collected proceeds fund Restore Colorado grants, which support regenerative agricultural projects in Colorado. After a really successful pilot, after our seed funding, the Colorado Department of Agriculture now funds the expansion of this program statewide. So that's been a really interesting and exciting project to be a part of. So finally, climate risk. It's not news to you that climate change is here and it's getting personal. And if left unabated from what we're currently doing, the impacts will be worse. I know that many of you have been living in Boulder a long time. I'm at 22 years here, but just in the last 10 years, here are the climate-related disasters that my 12-year-old has experienced, and the last 2 of which she has been actively impacted by. So, this is not news again, but nearly every single Colorado resident has had firsthand experience with the impacts of climate change. And that means it's really hard to recover, respond, and appropriately resource all of that while mitigating the climate crisis. So regrettably, we have become quite an epicenter of climate-related catastrophes, which in turn means that our office is also in charge of helping with rebuild and climate risk and resilience. So we are not only responding a lot to these climate shocks that plague our community, but obviously this is from our $2 billion event of the Marshall Fire. And this is impacting communities still. And we have been deploying what's called rebuildbetter.org, which is basically a bunch of resources for planning, designing, and constructing high performance homes that are more resilient to future climate crisis. And we've been really pleased with the amount of fire victims that have chosen to participate in building a more climate resilient, climate friendly home. And over 40% of those rebuilding are actually doing that, which is so incredible and something to celebrate during a very challenging time of having to rebuild their homes. And it's not only just their homes, it's all the social and emotional costs that follow a climate-related disaster and a climate-related catastrophe. Another area is that we have built a detailed map of the county that visualizes the risk related to climate impacts, including high heat, poor air quality, wildfire, flooding, and drought, alongside demographic information, household income, language, race, age, and reliance on public transportation. So this tool is really helping us identify localized climate risk to assist in prioritization of how we're going to protect those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Okay, so I talked a lot about systems changed. We talked about some of our localized services. There's a bunch of other ones that I'm not going to cover today, but now we want to talk about the third kind of angle or approach we take in the how, which is fostering innovation. Last year, we launched a first of its kind climate innovation fund of just over $500,000. And this is really exciting because it basically is through a competitive process. We're receiving total requests of 2 million or more in funding, and we awarded five incredible climate pioneers, all doing really special work. The top photo is a new small-scale prototype for on-site conversion of trees killed by the mountain pine beetle into high-value carbon-negative biochar-based fertilizer. So this is Takachar. I was out with them on Tuesday, and they were demonstrating this prototype with a bunch of state legislators who are interested in biochar applications. And it's absolutely incredible what they're doing, removing liability biomass and the transformation of that into biochar for fertilizer on our ag lands. So that's really exciting about the application of decentralized biochar processes where they can actually be utilized right there. The bottom photo is another awardee, the Boulder Watershed Collective, which is inoculating wood chips with native mycelium to transform excess woody biomass into activated organic matter. So cool. This activated organic matter can be applied to degraded land to improve carbon sequestration, watershed resilience, ecosystem resiliency, and biodiversity. So these are just 2 of the 5 winners that I wanted to highlight. Obviously, there's a lot more. There's 3 more, but really innovative stuff going on right here in our backyard with climate pioneers. We also started and co-founded a 4 Corners Carbon Coalition. So this is a partnership. Again, I'm talking about collective action through partnerships and pooling our resources. And this includes Flagstaff, Arizona, Salt Lake City, Utah, Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we are pooling resources to fund carbon removal projects in the 4 Corners region. Through, again, another competitive application process, recipients of this coalition's inaugural round of grant funding are supporting projects that integrate carbon removal with real-world concrete production. Given concrete production is responsible, as you probably already know, for 7% of the world's emissions, we are focused on solutions that integrate carbon removal into concrete because it's a huge potential to scale and be replicated across other local governments around the globe. So I'm always asking the question about, we have to transform society, and what do I matter in all this? And I think right now my answer is still the same as it always has been, that yes, we all individually matter, and we won't forget that BP coined the term, right, carbon footprint, so that we could place the blame on ourselves versus the corporates that are actually causing this issue. But I do think we do matter, and I think we need to be part of that transformation and sharing our voice and making sure that we're part of pulling together our resources, banding together to demand change through legislation, urging lawmakers to initiate bold policies, and looking honestly at where our own investments are held. Just knowing that JP Morgan Chase is the top lender to fossil fuel companies and projects, a lot of us locally at the local government level, we need to understand where we're holding our money and individuals as well. So this is just one area that I think we could look to creating a better future and a cleaner future. And I'm dedicated, the rest of my life to this, because it is, I think, the crisis of our time and the moment for us to stand up. So thank you so much for having me, and I welcome questions. So thank you very much. The city has some great ideas. I'm completely supportive. You're correct in saying it's a big problem, especially the carbon produced from heating and cooling our buildings and our transportation. My question, what metrics is the city using to measure the increase in more energy efficient and non-fossil fuel based buildings and the increase in electric cars, buses, bikes in Boulder County that is attributable to city initiatives? What a great question. So we actually track this pretty meticulously, because any funding, any rebate incentive that we offer that's going towards an electric bike, EV, efficient energy efficiency, we record that and we take that data and we look at the emissions reductions associated with that and count that as part of our incentive suite that helped make that decision. Now, there's always going to be people who are going to have the stacked incentives, right? That we can't claim credit for everything, but we do track that tremendously, and we look at dollars per greenhouse gas emissions, dollar per ton of greenhouse gas emission reduced. We look at a suite of different metrics to understand where we're spending our resources and energy for efficiency and our suite of decarbonization services. There's another question, I might have missed it on the graph. What amount of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from climate disasters? That is not part of our graph. It's a really interesting question, because we know that there's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions associated with catastrophic wildfire. We don't incorporate that in the scope 1 and 2 emissions inventory that we're looking at. I think it should be, but it's not. It's actually not something that we're measuring in that sector-based inventory. Thank you for that question.
Susie, this is Chris again with Empower Our Future. I'm curious, I read some things about a report for the county about state and local government formation of green banks. I was wondering if you could give us any status update on that.
Sure, yeah. So we've worked with some professors to develop a white paper on the need for exploring a green bank in Colorado. I truly believe that building a diverse, inclusive, accountable green bank that fosters multi-agency coordination toward a range of investments is imperative. So we're working actively with the state on figuring out ways in which we can form, a new type of public banking institution that we know isn't greenwashing, ESG, and it would take a huge effort, but the Connecticut Green Bank is a great model. I think that would be a place, for example, where public funds could sit differently than where they're spending the night right now, which is a lot of fossil fuel investment banks. So appreciate you asking that. We've written the white paper. We are working actively on building stakeholder engagement around that. That is a humongous play for one county government to start the conversation. Oh, Leslie, you're so smart. Let's see. A lot of HVAC companies are not supporting the installation of heat pumps, which is so true. Does the county have a list of heat pump installers that they recommend? Also, what is the county doing to help train HVAC providers on the new generation of heat pumps and proper installation? So happy you asked that. The last 3 weeks, we've been working on a plan for next year to really create a pipeline of all sorts of basically decarbonization workforce. And that includes creating a very tightly run, similar to what we did with Energy Smart, a tightly run contractor network that's complementary to Excel, I would say, but even stronger than theirs, because there's a lot of people who are being talked out of the technology, even though it's perfectly wonderful. So we are working on a workforce pipeline and incentivizing basically incentivizing and paying for workforce training for free. So we're working on a whole plan for 2024 delivery, but we are very aware of that problem, and it's something that we're trying to tackle in partnership with workforce, in partnership with other organizations and agencies, but we are on it, and we are very aware. Even half my staff who were getting heat pumps have had the experience of being talked out of a heat pump. So we're getting real on the ground experience with that. So thanks for the question. Okay, oh, good. Okay, so please describe how IRA funds will flow into Boulder County to help residents with cost of heat pump retrofits and other electrification projects. Okay, so there's a bunch of different ways that the IRA funding ostensibly will be supporting Boulder County residents. A lot of the funding is going to flow through the state through their incentives. And we on the ground here in Boulder County are here to unlock that for you, because we're trying to basically utilize our existing Energy Smart and PACE services for residents and businesses to demystify all the rebates and incentives. And that's the whole point, so that we make it so easy for anybody to understand how to stack the investments, because there's state tax credits, there's going to be state IRA funding and incentives, there's localized incentives, and then there's the utility incentives. And following all of that is dizzying. So we are, through those programs that I discussed, that's the platform for which we are going to help Boulder County residents understand the true cost at the end of the day of this technology. We're also, so that's one way that we're doing it. We're also applying for huge IRA dollars on our team. We have put in 2 massive grants. I talked about one for IIJA funding, which is an infrastructure funding for electric vehicles. And we just put in a huge one for increasing tree canopy, because we're going to need as many nature-based solutions, and trees are amazing, and they not only suck up carbon, but they provide shade, and we need all nature-based solutions in addition to decarbonizing our built environment. So those are just 2, and we're looking actively at what else we're going to go after, but that takes a lot of time and effort, and we're hopeful that we can expand resources for Boulder County residents there. Is your organization tracking the actual tree reduction in the county's overall carbon footprint that has resulted from completed programs? Yes, we are. And so there, and that's why we've started these systems change work, because if you're looking at a lot of our offerings, especially Energy Smart and PACE, you're not going to see more than a 10%. It doesn't even show up actually in our annual greenhouse gas inventory. So that is why the scale of the problem is so huge, that despite tracking our emission reductions per household or per business, it's not making a dent. That's why PUC activation, policy at the statewide level, these other system shifts are absolutely imperative, all the while providing localized climate services so that we can participate and show what's possible in a local community that cares about climate. So more to unpack there, and I'm happy to sit down and show anyone that data. Let's see, next question. Ooh, community choice energy. Okay, we think there will be community choice energy enabling legislation next year in the state to allow communities that want to search for alternative electric suppliers, like many communities around Colorado have done. Do you anticipate that Boulder County will be supporting the community choice energy option? Yes, I do think we will. I think there's a lot to unpack, and it's nuanced on how that plan kind of rolls out. We're not active on it right now, because it depends on how it's designed and written, obviously. We must not make it an opportunity for communities to do less on climate. There should be very clear stipulations in there that the communities need to do more. And I think that we are fans of this as an approach for more regional efforts here with energy options for our residents. So yes, thank you for that question. Oh goodness, what about regulations against cutting down trees and forests on private land? That is one that I'm probably not going to be able to tackle. And I see the point, because trees are absolutely imperative for, not only improving air quality, but also removing carbon. But that is not my purview. I think that is more for community planning and permitting. I'm not on the localized regulation side of that. Preserving wetlands. So, I think Boulder County is well known for preserving open space, and a lot of wetlands are on our open space. And so we'll continue to put those open spaces to good use by valuing our natural assets that as we have with our open space. Oh, thanks, Suzanne. So much good work happening. What is the county thinking on pursuing additional compost infrastructure to support regenerative agriculture and carbon farming? Oh man, I wish I could just tell you right today that that is the focus and happening in 2024. You know that, Dan. But I think my crystal ball or my 8-ball, I would say, is we are still very much invested in the idea of a localized compost facility. We have been setting aside funds, dedicated funds every single year to ensuring we have enough money to build infrastructure. We've had a lot of change in hands and leadership, and we're still looking actively at land to be able to do this. But this is top. I've heard from our county commissioners that it is a top priority to figure out compost solutions for many different reasons, not only for the benefit, the co-benefits of putting it back on our land and regen, but also the methane reductions from landfill, as we all know, are significant. Okay, Leslie, the city of Boulder has been leading on many climate programs. Can you bring us up to date on efforts being made by other Boulder County communities and how the county is helping these communities develop local climate programs? Thanks for all of this. Yes, so the county in 2015, we launched what's called, what is it called? The Local Sustainability Matching Grant. And what we've been doing is we've been providing funding to our local communities outside of the city of Boulder. And we have great colleagues at the city of Boulder who we lean on a lot, incredible people like Jonathan Cohen, who's a counterpart of mine. In other communities, we've been building capacity. So we've been helping them support we've been working in regional cohorts first and supporting, again, that collective wisdom, that collective action so that we're not all doing looking down and doing our own inventories. We've done all the inventories for the communities together, including the consumption-based inventory that I discussed. And we also provide those resources so that they can build staff capacity. So we actually have supported a lot of the sustainability directors and coordinators across the county in those positions with the stipulation that those county governments over time will take those positions in-house and support them in perpetuity. So we've been really working on, again, building capacity and the regional collective cohort, fostering just, again, more pulling our power together comparatively to going at it alone. We're going to do the same for policy creation. Why does every local community go through the gauntlet of trying to figure out what their policy priorities are? Why can't we do it together? And that was the initiation of CC4CA. A lot of those communities, even communities that you wouldn't expect, are actually paying members into CC4CA. So that's really exciting. Please discuss the connection of air quality and climate and how Boulder County is working to simultaneously clean our air and protect our climate. They are inextricably linked, air quality and climate. There is a ton of activity that we are actively involved in with the regulations at the state and the AQCC. So we have an incredible expert on our policy team who has 17 years of experience in air quality policy and rulemaking. And she is actively trying to advance stronger regulation to protect our air. And unfortunately, during the last session, it didn't get passed, but these are the types of things that we work on at a statewide level because it is really about regulation outside of our borders, because a lot of our air quality issues, including ozone, are the combination of our own transportation emissions combined with oil and gas emissions. And that creates that nasty ozone layer and poor air quality that we experience. We're really hoping that the governor takes a stronger stance on industry and creates more regulation, because that's one lever that we have for improving our air quality for sure. Localized stuff, we do a ton of research to understand, at the Boulder Reservoir, to understand where these air quality, the precursors to our air quality issues are coming from. So that's how we know that they're coming from oil and gas wells. So that type of research really informs what we're doing next in terms of state regulation and policy. Does the state or county have laws that might override HOA restrictions on water conservation? We do not. We do not have localized laws that override water conservation. So we can absolutely, and we do support a lot of water conservation work. We support our wonderful Boulder watershed collectives, but we have limited purview in regulation in that sense. Let's see. So glad to hear the county is pursuing a consumption-based inventory. Can you tell us more? Yes. So the report is about to be published. I was just reading the last draft of it, and I can tell you what it's saying, which is not new news. Land use is absolutely critical, and what we're consuming in our households is abysmal in terms of our emissions. So household emissions are extremely high. What we eat, what we consume, it really matters when you integrate that into a sector-based emissions inventory. It looks at like really at the household level, where can we as a collective humanity reduce our inputs? And I love the fact that this inventory looks at it aligns with our sector-based inventory. It shows transportation emissions are significant, which is what we always, we know. But the other, I guess the other complement to that is, again, on the land use side, denser. We need to encourage density. We need to encourage land use policy that supports climate, and it's a climate protective policy is land use, this progressive land use policy. So that hopefully will be helpful in informing future legislation. Okay, the city has been doing great work on PUC and various proceedings. Do you think it would be possible for Boulder County to join these efforts? Yes, we lean on the city a ton for their incredible PUC work, and we want to do more, and we want to encourage CC4CA, at least the members that are a part of investor-owned utility communities, to do way more with PUC lobbying and PUC advocacy. So that is absolutely top of mind. It's something that we've been thinking about. How do we actively engage more? We often, add ourselves with the city of Boulder, but it's like city of Boulder and Boulder County, and that can be a little bit of an eye roll, as you all know. So we're trying to actively figure out ways to support our climate allies who are doing this great work without, necessarily being out front. So if you have any strategic ideas there, Leslie, I would love to hear them, because we do have resources and we want to actively support lobbying and PUC advocacy. Okay, I'm just taking a breath. Hi, Susie. Hi, Allison. At the nexus of community choice, the carbon footprint of the built environment, rates, and distribution transmission is lithium, non-battery storage capacity. We have not done enough here. So I appreciate you calling that out. We need to do more work in storage. So I'll just leave it at that. And again, love the brain trust on this, in this participant. I can't see you all, so it's just awesome to know you're here, but please do reach out if you have ideas of where we can do collective work in that. But this is, what is the status of Xcel Energy's attempts to limit new connections for solar installations? We have been very active at behind the scenes, working tremendous amount on trying to figure that out, because that is, we do not think that's fair. So we were working on it, and I can't give you a answer on that right now, but we know it's an issue. Okay, what is the best way for citizens to interact with the county commissioners and staff on these issues? What I pride myself on is being really responsive. And if you have ideas or thoughts or want to have a coffee, I love it. I always want to hear from people who, are in this sector, who are smarter than I am, who are working on this stuff. I really value that about our community. So it's either sitting down with our incredible commissioners, or sitting down with me, or emailing, or both. So I welcome that. And I know they do too, especially Commissioner Stoltzman, who's, very much active on the climate front. Oh, any new ideas about stopping the Denver Water Board from cutting down over 100,000 trees in the Gross Reservoir Dam enlargement? I'm thankful that you asked that. I'm saddened that it's happening. I wrote the mitigation plan for that and looked at all the carbon implications and the transportation emissions, and we're requiring Denver Water to do a lot on the mitigation piece of that, including ensuring that those precious felled trees are going to highly productive biochar applications. There's also a big climate mitigation fund they have to pay into, but no, I don't know any other way to stop that water board from proceeding there. I think I have time for one more. What is the city doing to make the switch to electric lawnmowers and lawn equipment, including the increasing number of lawn service companies? We've been extremely active in this space. If you go to the PACE Partners website, that's our Partners for a Clean Environment. We've been doing a ton of incentives and information and lots of expos on lawn equipment, especially increasing the electric lawn equipment for service companies. So we've had a lot of interest and excitement and transforming that market. So please do check us out on the PACE. There's lots of events happening there too, just in terms of expos, so that lawn service companies can actually experience the benefits of not having, fossil gas blown into their face while they're cutting their lawn. So thanks for the question.
Susie, so on behalf of everybody here at Empower Our Future, we want to thank you so much. This has been a very powerful and informative presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thanks for all the work you're doing. And I'll pass it back to Mary to do the wrap up.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you again, Susie. Really appreciate such an amazing breadth of projects you are involved with. And the collaborative efforts are really wonderful to be hearing about. Please plan to give us updates, and/or we will try to make a point of getting updates from you and your team. And again, we're going to wrap up for tonight. I want to thank the other Empower Our Future communication team members who are integral to making these Empower Hours happen. And that would be Paul Cullen, Chris Hoffman, and Steve Whitaker. The video of this recording and other Empower Hours will be up on our website at empowerourfuture.org/events. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Take care.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you all. Good to see you. Thank you.